The October morning in Glendale was cold and gray, like most days in Chase Russell's life over the past 3 years. The sound of a wrench hitting metal echoed through Russell Auto Service, a small auto repair shop on the outskirts of town that he had inherited from his father and was now all he had left. Chase lay under the hood of an old Chevrolet, trying to focus on his work, but his thoughts kept returning to that day 3 years ago, November 15th, 2021. A date burned into his memory forever. The day his wife Miriam died in a car accident on Highway 287 while returning home from visiting her friend Caitlin in a neighboring town. The details of that night came back to him with painful clarity. The call from the highway patrol at 2 in the morning. The cold, emotionless voice of Sergeant Davis. "Mr. Russell, I'm calling about your wife, Miriam Russell. There's been an accident." The trip to the morgue. The identification. The funeral, attended by the entire population of Glendale, a small town where everyone knew everyone else. The car Miriam was driving skidded off the road in heavy rain and fell into a river. Her body was found a week later, several miles downstream. A closed coffin. "Too much time in the water," the coroner explained. Chase didn't insist on an autopsy. Why? It was clear. An accident. A tragedy. The end of the story. But was it really the end? Chase climbed out from under the hood and wiped his hands on an oily rag. At 35, he looked older than his age. His hair was graying at the temples, and the wrinkles around his eyes had deepened. Working in the garage was his salvation, the only way to keep his mind off what he had lost. Their marriage wasn't perfect. Miriam had always dreamed of more than life in Glendale could offer. She worked as an administrator at a local hospital, but often talked about how she wanted to travel, see the world, try something new. Chase, on the other hand, was a homebody, a man of habits and traditions. He loved his town, his garage, his simple life. "You never understood me," she said in the last months of their marriage. "You think life is just work, home, work, home. What about dreams, Chase? What about the things that make us alive?" He didn't know what to say then. He still doesn't know now. The ring of his cell phone snapped him out of his memories. The screen lit up with the name Bill Thompson, his only remaining close friend. "Chase, buddy, how's it going?" Bill's voice sounded forced and cheerful. "Same old, working. Listen, do you want to go to the Red Horseshoe tonight? We could have a few beers and talk. You spend too much time alone." Chase knew Bill was worried about him. Everyone in town was worried. Poor Chase Russell, who had lost his wife and now lived like a recluse. But their pity only annoyed him. "Not tonight, Bill. I've got a lot of work to do." "Chase, buddy, it's been 3 years now. Miriam wouldn't want you to be so hard on yourself. She would want you to move on." Move on. As if it were that easy. As if you could just pick up and forget someone you'd spent 7 years with, someone who was the center of your world. "I know you want to help, but I need time." 3 years is a long time, Chase. Maybe it's time to think about dating. I know a couple of nice girls. Chase tuned out. Dating. As if Miriam could be replaced like a part in a car. Take out the old one, put in a new one, and everything works as before. He went back to work, but he couldn't concentrate. His thoughts raced between the past and the present, between what was and what could have been. Lately, he had found himself talking to Miriam more and more, as if she were still there. "What do you think of this car, honey? Remember how we planned that trip to Colorado?" The workday ended late. Chase locked up the garage and drove home to his small house on Maple Street. The house they had bought together 5 years ago, full of plans and hopes. Now it seemed too big for one person, too quiet, too empty. Dinner consisted of reheated pizza and beer. Chase turned on the TV but didn't watch it. The sounds were just background noise filling the silence. He took out his laptop, an old model he hardly ever used. The internet wasn't his thing, but sometimes he would visit auto parts websites or read the news. Today, something made him go to Facebook. Maybe it was Bill's words about moving on. Maybe it was just curiosity. He rarely went on social media. Miriam's profile was still there, like a memorial, and every time he saw it, Chase felt a punch in the chest. He scrolled through his news feed, reading posts from old acquaintances, looking at photos of their children, vacations, everyday life. The usual routine of people who hadn't lost their significant others. And then he saw it. A photo in a post by Jenna Marks, Miriam's classmate. A group photo from some party. "Great night with the girls in Denver," read the caption. Several women smiled at the camera, holding glasses of champagne, and one of them was Miriam. Chase rubbed his eyes several times, thinking he was seeing things. But no, it was definitely her. The same auburn hair, the same smile, the same green eyes. Maybe she looked a little different. Her hair was shorter, she was wearing different clothes, but it was definitely Miriam. The post was from yesterday. Chase's heart raced. His hands trembled as he zoomed in on the photo, studying every detail. This couldn't be true. Miriam was dead. He had identified her body. He had buried her. But the face in the photo was his wife's. He clicked on Jenna's profile, trying to find more information, but the profile was partially private. He could only see a few posts and photos. He studied the group photo again and again, trying to find clues. Suddenly, he noticed a tag on the photo. Hovering his cursor over the face of the woman who looked like Miriam, he saw the name, Emily Harris. Emily Harris, not Miriam Russell. Chase opened a new tab and typed the name into the search engine. Several social media profiles came up. He clicked on the first one, a Facebook profile with limited privacy settings. The profile photo was blurry, but he could make out the silhouette of a woman. He tried Instagram. The profile was at Emily_Harris_Con Colorado. Several photos were visible without a subscription. Landscapes, food, selfies in the mirror, and in one of the selfies, he clearly saw Miriam's face. It was her, alive, in Colorado, under a different name. Chase leaned back in his chair, feeling the world collapse around him for the second time in 3 years. The first time was when he was told Miriam was dead. The second time was when he realized she was alive. What did that mean? How was it possible? If she was alive, then who had he buried? If she was alive, why hadn't she come home? Why had she let him think she was dead? Questions swirled in his head, each more painful than the last. But the question that burned inside him was the simplest and most terrifying. If Miriam was alive, did that mean she had betrayed him so deeply that she had faked her own death to avoid their marriage? Chase closed his laptop and grabbed another beer. His hands were still shaking. He tried to find a rational explanation. Maybe it was someone who just looked a lot like Miriam. Maybe his grief was playing tricks on him. But deep down, he knew the truth. It was Miriam. The woman he had mourned for 3 years was alive and living a new life under a different name in a different state. And now he had to find out why. Chase didn't sleep all night. He sat at the kitchen table staring at his laptop screen, studying every available photo of Emily Harris. Every feature, every gesture, every smile screamed that this was Miriam, his Miriam. By morning, he had made up his mind. The garage could wait. Bill could take care of the urgent orders. He needed answers, and he was going to get them. First, Chase called Peace and Serenity Funeral Home, where he had arranged his wife's funeral 3 years ago. Mr. Johnson, the elderly owner, remembered him. "Chase, son, how are you doing? I hope you're holding up." "Mr. Johnson, I need to clarify something. About Miriam's funeral, I have some questions." Pause. "Of course, son, what's on your mind?" "The body. You said it was in poor condition due to the time in the water, but I want to know for sure. Who performed the identification?" "You know, Chase, you were there yourself. We showed you her personal belongings, her ring, her bracelet, her driver's license. You confirmed that it was Miriam. But I didn't see her face." "No, son. We explained that the condition was not suitable for an open casket. But all the documents and personal belongings matched. The dental records, too." Dental records. Chase remembered. He had agreed to a dental comparison for final confirmation of identity. How could dental records be faked? "Mr. Johnson, who else was involved in the identification process? Any relatives, friends?" "Well, there was that girl. Miriam's friend. Caitlin, I think. She came by, was very upset, helped with the coffin, the flowers. Nice girl." Caitlin, Miriam's best friend, who was supposedly the last person to see her alive. The one Miriam was on her way to see on that fateful night. After talking to Mr. Johnson, Chase dialed the Glendale Police Department. Sergeant Davis, who had called him 3 years ago that night, was still working there. Davis here. "Sergeant, this is Chase Russell. Remember me? Miriam Russell, the car accident in 2021. Of course I remember, Chase. My condolences again. What's going on? I need to look at the case files. The reports, the photos from the scene. Is that possible? Why do you need that? The case is closed. It was an accident. I have new information. I can't explain over the phone. Davis agreed to meet in an hour at the station. Chase got dressed, wearing something other than his work clothes for the first time in 3 years. Dark jeans and a shirt. He looked like a man going to a funeral. In a way, he was. At the station, Davis laid out a folder with the case files on the table. Photos of the wrecked car, rescue service reports, the accident report. The car went off the road here. Davis pointed to the map. It was raining hard. Visibility was poor. The skid marks show that the driver tried to stop, but it was too late. The car broke through the guardrail and fell into the river. Chase studied the photos. A red Honda Civic, Miriam's car, wrecked, mangled, but recognizable. And the body? It was found a week later, 5 miles downstream. The current is strong in that area, especially after rain. Were there any other witnesses? Anyone who saw the accident? No, it was late at night and the weather was bad. The car wasn't noticed until the next morning by passing motorists. Chase pored over the documents. Something bothered him, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Sergeant, where is the car now? At Teddy Morris's junkyard. The insurance company paid compensation and the car was written off. After the police station, Chase drove to the junkyard. Teddy Morris, a burly man in a greasy jumpsuit, remembered the car. Yes, a red Honda. It was a terrible sight. A woman died, right? Sad story. Can I take a look at it? Sure, but I don't know what's left. 3 years in the open air. Corrosion does its work. They walked between rows of wrecked cars to the far corner of the junkyard. The Honda was there, even more ravaged by time and weather. Chase walked around the car and looked inside, and then he saw what he was looking for without even knowing it. On the passenger seat, in the gap between the seat and the backrest, a small metal object glinted. Chase bent down and picked it up. It was a silver earring in the shape of a star. Miriam never wore earrings like that. She preferred simple, classic jewelry. This earring was bright and flashy, not her style at all. Teddy, did anyone else look in this car after the accident? Well, the police, of course. The insurance agent came by. Oh yes, and there was a girl, the victim's friend. She was very upset. She wanted to take some personal belongings. Caitlin? I don't remember her name. She was pretty blonde, she was crying a lot. Chase clenched the earring in his fist. Caitlin. She had been here. Was she looking for something or planting something? That evening, Chase sat at home writing down everything he knew. Miriam is alive and living in Colorado under the name Emily Harris. Someone died in that car, but who? Caitlin was the last person to see Miriam alive. Caitlin helped with the funeral and examined the car at the junkyard. There was an earring in the car that Miriam never wore. The picture was starting to come together, but it was terrifying. If Miriam faked her death, then someone else died in her place. Someone whose body was so badly damaged that identification was impossible. The next morning, Chase made his final decision. He locked the garage, left a note for Bill, and set off for Colorado. The GPS showed an 8-hour drive to Denver. He had time to think, plan, and prepare for his encounter with a ghost. The road stretched on endlessly. Chase stopped only to refuel and get coffee. His thoughts raced between the past and the present. He remembered the last months of their marriage, how Miriam had become distant, how often she stayed late at work, how often she visited Caitlin. I need space to think, she said. I feel trapped, Chase. Not trapped by you, but by life in general. He didn't understand then. He thought it would pass, that they would work things out. But she was already planning her escape. By evening, Chase had made it to Denver. He checked into a cheap motel and began his search. Emily Harris's address was easy to find. Public records, voter registration lists. She lived in a small neighborhood on the outskirts of town, in a mid-range apartment building. Chase parked across the street and waited. Waited for the woman he had buried 3 years ago. At 7:30 a.m., the front door opened and she walked out. Miriam, alive, breathing, real. Her hair was shorter than he remembered, and she was wearing a stylish jacket and jeans. She looked happy, younger, freer. She got into a white Subaru Outback and drove away. Chase followed her at a distance, his heart pounding so hard he was afraid he would pass out. Miriam arrived at a small advertising agency in the city center. Creative Solutions, Colorado. Chase read the name on the sign. She was working. She had a job, a life, a routine, everything she had run away from in Glendale. He spent the day watching. During her lunch break, Miriam met a man, tall, athletic, with dark hair. They kissed and held hands. She had someone. That evening, Chase followed them to a restaurant. He sat at the next table and listened to their conversation. You look tired," the man said. "Maybe we should go to the mountains this weekend? Get away from the city." "Sounds wonderful, Tom," Miriam replied. The voice was the same, but the intonation was different, more lively, more lighthearted. "I haven't been to the mountains in so long." Tom. So his name was Tom. "You never talk about your past," Tom continued. "Before you moved to Denver. You just appeared out of nowhere 3 years ago." Miriam tensed up. Chase saw it, a subtle change in her posture, in her expression. "There's nothing to tell. A boring life in a boring town. I prefer to think about the future, not the past. But family, friends? I didn't have anyone close to me. That's why I was able to move so easily." Lies. Every word was a lie. She had a husband who loved her. She had a life she had simply thrown away like old clothes. Chase felt anger rising inside him, but along with the rage came relief. She was alive. The woman he loved more than life itself was alive. But she had betrayed him more deeply than he could ever have imagined. After dinner, Tom walked Miriam home but didn't stay. Chase waited another hour to make sure she was alone, then walked up to the building. His fingers trembled as he pressed the intercom button. "Emily Harris, apartment 15. "Yes?" Miriam's voice came through the speaker. "Emily, it's a delivery. Flowers." "Flowers? But I didn't order anything." From Tom, a surprise. A pause, then the sound of a lock opening. Chase climbed to the 3rd floor. The door to apartment 15 was ajar, and he could see a security chain through the crack. "Where are the flowers?" Miriam asked. Chase looked up and their eyes met. Miriam turned pale as death. Her hand trembled on the chain. "Hi, Miriam," Chase said quietly. "Or is it Emily now?" She tried to slam the door shut, but Chase blocked it with his shoulder. "We need to talk." "Chase, I can explain everything." "Yes," he said, stepping into the apartment. "Explain to me how you could make me think you were dead. Explain to me who I buried in your place." Miriam backed into the apartment, and for the first time in 3 years, Chase found himself in the same room with the woman he loved and hated at the same time. Miriam's apartment was small but cozy. Modern furniture, bright paintings on the walls, fresh flowers on the windowsill. Everything she had dreamed of for their home in Glendale, but which he had considered an unnecessary expense. Now, seeing how she had arranged her new life, Chase realized how little he had known his wife. Miriam stood by the window, wrapping her arms around herself. She was pale and trembling, but there was no fear in her eyes, only fatigue and a strange determination. "How did you find me?" she asked quietly. "Facebook, a photo from Jenna Marks's party." Miriam closed her eyes. "I asked her not to post that photo. I told her I didn't want to be on social media, but she did, and now I'm here." Chase slowly walked across the room, looking at the photos on the shelves. Miriam and Tom in the mountains. Miriam at some corporate event. Miriam with a group of friends. A whole new life in which there was no place for him. 3 years, Miriam! 3 years I thought you were dead." "I know. You know?" Chase's voice rose. "You know? What else do you know? Do you know that I visited your grave every day for the first 6 months? That I talked to your headstone? That I blamed myself for not being able to save you?" Miriam turned to him. There were tears in her eyes. "Chase, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I just didn't see any other way out." "You didn't see any other way out?" Chase took a step toward her. "What about divorce? What about just talking? How about saying, 'Chase, I don't want to be married anymore'? You wouldn't have understood. You would have tried to stop me, to convince me to stay. You would have said that we could fix things, that we just needed to try harder, and I couldn't pretend anymore. Pretend what? That I'm happy. That this life is what I want. That I can be a mechanic's wife in a small town for the rest of my life. The words hit him like slaps across the face. Chase stepped back, as if she had struck him physically. So I was a prison to you. Not you. Life. This whole way of life. Chase, I got married when I was 23. I'd never lived alone, never traveled, never tried a career. I went straight from my parents' house to you. And that justifies what you did? That you made me bury someone else, thinking it was you? Miriam's face became stony. How do you know? I know a lot. I know that Caitlin was helping you. I know there was an earring in your car that you never wore. I know someone else died that night instead of you. Chase moved closer. Tell me the truth, Miriam. The whole truth. Who died in your car? Miriam sank down onto the couch, covering her face with her hands. She was silent for several minutes, and Chase could see her fighting an internal battle. Her name was Tammy Wright, she finally said quietly. A drug addict, homeless. She sometimes asked for money at the hospital where I worked. And that night, the night I was supposedly driving to Caitlin's, I actually met Tammy. I gave her money, food, offered her a ride into town. It was raining hard and she was soaked to the skin. Chase felt himself go cold. Go on. We were driving down Highway 287. Tammy was high. Heroin, cocaine, I don't know what. She started hallucinating, grabbing the steering wheel. I tried to calm her down, but she got aggressive and started fighting with me in the car. Miriam. The car veered off the road. I managed to jump out. But Tammy... Miriam looked at him. Tammy was killed in the crash. You jumped out? At the last moment. I got a few scratches and bruises, but I was mostly unharmed. And then I realized... Miriam stood up and walked over to the window. I realized this was my chance. Tammy was about my height, my weight. My ID was in the car. My things were in the car. She didn't have any ID on her. People like that don't usually carry ID. My God. Chase sank back into his chair. You left her to die. She was already dying. I checked her pulse. There was none. And even if there had been, Chase, that woman was a walking corpse. An overdose. It was a matter of days, weeks at most. That wasn't your decision to make. Maybe, but I made the decision. I put my jewelry on her, my bracelet, my ring. I left my purse with my documents in it. And I walked away. Where to? To Caitlin's. She lived half an hour's walk from the accident site. I knew she would help. Did Caitlin know? Not at first. I told her I'd been in an accident, that I'd almost been killed, that I needed to hide because I was being threatened. Miriam turned away from the window. She believed me. Caitlin was always naive. And then, when the news about the accident came out, when the investigation started, I told her the truth. Part of it. What do you mean, part of it? I told her I wanted to disappear, that I couldn't live my old life anymore, that this was my chance to start over. I didn't tell her about Tammy. I said I just took advantage of the situation. Chase shook his head slowly, and she agreed to help you. Caitlin understood me better than anyone. She knew how I suffered in my marriage, how trapped I felt. Trapped! Chase laughed bitterly. I guess 7 years of marriage, the house we built together, plans for children, all of that was a trap for you. Not everything, not you, but life, yes, life was a trap. Tell me about Caitlin. What exactly did she do? Miriam sat down across from him. She helped me get new documents. She had a friend who did that kind of thing. For money, he made me a new ID and social security number. Emily Harris. Yes, I chose the name myself. Emily is after Emily Dickinson. Harris is just because I like the sound of it. What about your dental records? How did you fake your dental records? I didn't fake them. I destroyed them. What? A few months before the accident, I broke into Dr. Fisher's dental office and destroyed my file. I said I wanted to change doctors because of a conflict and asked them to send my records to a new clinic. But instead of sending them, I destroyed them. What about the comparison with the victim's teeth? Tammy was a drug addict. She had no teeth. Most of them had fallen out or rotted away. The coroner had nothing to compare them with. Chase felt nauseous. Every detail of the plan showed how carefully Miriam had thought everything through. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. She had been planning her disappearance for months. What happened next? After you became Emily Harris? Caitlin helped me get to Denver. She had a cousin here who agreed to let me stay with her for a while. I found a job, rented an apartment, and started a new life. And you never once thought about me? About what I was going through? Miriam was silent for a long time. I did. Every day. But I knew that if I contacted you, if I let you know I was alive, I wouldn't be able to stop myself. I'd go back. And I couldn't go back, Chase. I would have died in that town. Slowly, but I would have died. But now I'm the one who's dead. Part of me died the day I was told you were dead. I know, and I'm sorry. But I couldn't sacrifice my life for your peace of mind. Your life? Miriam, we had a good life. You had a good life. You did what you loved. You worked in a garage like your father. You lived in the house you grew up in. You had friends, habits, a routine. What did I have? A job at a hospital I hated? The responsibilities of a mechanic's wife? The prospect of having children and becoming a housewife? You never said you hated your job. Because you never asked. You thought you knew what I wanted, but you never asked about my dreams, my plans. That's not true. It is. When I talked about traveling, you said we didn't have the money. When I mentioned moving to a big city, you said Glendale was a great place to live. When I dreamed of a career in advertising or design, you said it wasn't serious. Chase tried to remember those conversations, but only fragments came back to him. Had he really said those things? Had he really ignored her dreams? But murder, Miriam. You killed a man. I didn't kill Tammy. She died in an accident she caused. You could have saved her. You could have called an ambulance. And then what? Tell the police I was driving a junkie? That she attacked me in the car? I would have been charged with manslaughter or contributing to her death. But you would have been honest. Honesty is a luxury only those who are satisfied with their lives can afford. Chase stood up and paced the room. What now? What do you want to do now that I know the truth? I don't know. Miriam looked at him imploringly. Chase, please don't destroy what I've built. I have a job I love. I have Tom, who cares about me. I have a life. I don't have a life. I have nothing but memories of a woman who betrayed me worse than I could ever have imagined. You can build a new life. Find someone else. How can you say that? Chase's voice broke. How can you stand there and tell me to find someone else when I've spent 3 years mourning you? Because I want you to be happy. You're lying. You want me to disappear and get out of the way of your new life. They stood facing each other, and Chase saw fear in Miriam's eyes. Not physical fear. She wasn't afraid he would hit her. She was afraid he would destroy her new life. Tell me about Tom, he said more quietly. What about him? Does he know who you really are? No, no one does. And you're going to live with him in a lie? Just like you lived with me in a lie? It's not a lie. Emily Harris is me too, maybe even more real than the Miriam you knew. The real you is a murderer and a traitor. And the real you is a man who never listened to his wife and didn't notice that she was unhappy. The blow was accurate. Chase felt something break inside him. Maybe she was right. Maybe he really was a bad husband. Maybe he really hadn't noticed her unhappiness. But that didn't excuse what she had done. I'm leaving, he said finally. Where to? Home. To Glendale. To my life, which it turns out was a prison for you. Chase. But first I'm going to do something. He turned to her. I'm going to tell the police the truth. About Tammy Wright. About what you did. Miriam's face went pale. You can't. You don't have any proof. I have you. Alive when you should be dead. That's enough to start an investigation. Chase, please. Goodbye, Miriam. Or Emily. Or whatever you think you are. He headed for the door, but her voice stopped him. If you do this, you'll destroy not only my life, but Tom's, and Caitlin's, and everyone connected to me. Chase turned around. Maybe. But you know what? You ruined my life first. And Tammy Wright's life too. Tammy was a nobody, a junkie with no family, no future. Everyone has a right to live, even junkies. He left the apartment, leaving Miriam alone with her fears and lies. In the elevator, he leaned against the wall and tried to collect his thoughts. 3 years ago, he had lost his wife. Today, he had lost her again, but in a different way. Today, he realized that the woman he had loved had never existed. She was an illusion, a mask worn by the real Miriam. Chase sat in his car outside Miriam's apartment all night. He couldn't leave. He couldn't go back to the motel. He couldn't accept what he had heard. Thoughts spun around in his head like shards of broken glass, each turn bringing new pain. Tammy Wright, an unnamed victim buried under his wife's name. A woman who died alone and now lies in a grave with someone else's name on the headstone. How old was she? Did she have a family who was still looking for her? Children who would never know what happened to their mother? And Miriam just took that life and threw it away like a useless thing. She used someone else's death for her own resurrection, and not a shred of remorse. Only excuses and attempts to shift the blame onto him. The real you is a man who never listened to his wife. Maybe there was some truth in that. Maybe he really didn't notice her unhappiness. But that didn't justify murder, because it was murder. Not direct, but murder nonetheless. Miriam could have saved Tammy, but she chose her own freedom. Dawn found him behind the wheel. His eyes were teary from exhaustion. His back ached from the uncomfortable position. He saw Tom arrive at Miriam's early in the morning. She must have called him after their conversation. They stood at the window for a long time, embracing. Miriam was crying. Tom stroked her hair, clearly not understanding what was going on. Poor guy. He's in love with a ghost, a woman who doesn't exist. Emily Harris is as much a figment of his imagination as Miriam Russell's death. At 9 o'clock, Tom left, and Chase saw Miriam looking out the window, scanning the street. She was looking for his car. When their eyes met through the glass, she recoiled from the window. Chase got out of the car and walked up to her again. This time she opened the door immediately, without using the intercom. She looked terrible. Red eyes, pale face, disheveled hair. Not at all like the happy Emily Harris. "You were downstairs all night," she said, letting him into the apartment. "I was thinking." "About what?" "About Tammy Wright, about what she was like, how old she was, where she came from, if there's anyone still looking for her." Miriam wrapped her arms around herself. "Chase, please." "And I was thinking about us, about our marriage, about whether you were ever happy with me." "I was, in the beginning. When did that change?" Miriam went into the kitchen and turned on the coffee maker. Her hands were shaking. "Gradually, year after year, every time you dismissed my ideas, every time you said we couldn't afford a trip or a move, every time I realized I was going to spend my whole life in the same house, in the same city. I was working. I was trying to provide for us. You tried to maintain the status quo. You were as afraid of change as I was eager for it." Chase sat down at the kitchen table. "Why didn't you tell me? Straight, honest. Why didn't you ask for a divorce?" "Because," Miriam turned to him, "because you wouldn't have let me go." "What do you mean you wouldn't have let me go?" "You would have fought. You would have tried to convince me to stay. You would have promised to change. And I knew you couldn't. People don't change, Chase. You're a small-town mechanic who wants to live his life like his father. And I wanted more." "And that justifies what you did to Tammy?" "Tammy was an accident." "No." Chase stood up. "Tammy was an opportunity you took advantage of. You saw a chance to disappear, and you took it without thinking about the consequences." "Of course I thought about everything. About you, about my future, about..." "You didn't think about Tammy. To you, she was just a convenient corpse." Miriam's face contorted with anger. "Don't you dare say that. You don't know what I went through." "What did you go through?" "Miriam, you were married to a man who loved you. You had a home, a job, stability. Stability is a prison for those who want to live. And murder is liberation? I didn't kill her. You did. Maybe not with your own hands, but you killed her. You let her die so you could be free." Miriam threw her coffee cup into the sink. The cup shattered, sending shards flying across the floor. "You'll never understand. You never tried to understand." "Understand what? That my wife is a murderer? Understand what it means to suffocate in a life that doesn't suit you. Understand what it means to wake up every morning and realize that another day of the same boring, meaningless routine lies ahead. If it was so bad, why didn't you leave? Just pack your things and go?" "Because you would have found me. Because Glendale is a small town where everyone knows everyone. Because I didn't have the money for a new life. You can earn money. You can build a new life. But you can't bring Tammy Wright back to life. Tammy Wright was a walking corpse. She would have died in a week, a month at most. That wasn't your decision to make. It was my decision to make. At that moment, in that car, I had to choose between her life and my freedom. And you chose your freedom. Yes, Miriam turned to him, her eyes burning with an almost insane fire. Yes, I chose my freedom. And you know what? I would do it again, because those 3 years in Denver were the best years of my life. The best? Chase felt something tear inside him. Better than 7 years with a man who loved you? Yes, because here I live. I don't just exist. Here I have a job I chose, not one that was just available. Here I have a man who sees me as a person, not just a wife. Tom doesn't know who you really are. He knows Emily, and Emily is the real me. Emily is built on the corpse of Tammy Wright. So what? Tammy is dead. I can't bring her back, but I can live the life I want. Chase looked at the woman he once loved more than life itself, and didn't recognize her. This wasn't the Miriam he married. That Miriam was kind, compassionate, capable of crying over a dead bird. This one was a monster. You've changed, he said quietly. Yes, I have. I've become stronger. I've become capable of making decisions and taking responsibility for them. You've become a murderer. I've become free. At the expense of someone else's life. At the expense of a life that was going to end anyway. Chase took a step toward her. What about my life? What about my life? Did you think about what would happen to me? I did, and I knew you'd be okay. You're strong, Chase. You'll find someone else. I didn't want someone else. I wanted you. You wanted a version of me that didn't exist. You wanted a submissive wife who would be happy baking pies and having children forever. That's not true. It is. You never saw the real me. You only saw what you wanted to see. And you killed a man to become who you wanted to be. Miriam suddenly fell silent. They stood 2 steps apart, and Chase could see how tense her muscles were, how fast she was breathing. You know what's funny? She said finally. You came here to accuse me of murder, but you're killing me with every sentence you utter. What? You're trying to destroy everything I've built, my work, my relationship with Tom, my new life. You want to kill Emily to bring Miriam back. Emily never existed. Emily is the only one who exists. Miriam died in that car with Tammy. Tammy is dead. You killed her. I gave her meaning. Her death allowed me to live. You're sick. I'm free. Chase didn't remember how his hand ended up on her throat. He didn't remember the moment when rage finally overwhelmed his mind. He only saw Miriam's eyes, first surprised, then frightened, then pleading. Chase, she croaked. But he didn't hear her. All he could hear was her saying, these 3 years have been the best of my life. I would do it again. Tammy is dead anyway. All 3 years of grief, all 3 years of loneliness, all 3 years of self-recrimination, it had all been a lie. He had suffered for a woman who was happily building a new life on the bones of an innocent victim. I gave her meaning. How could she say such a thing? How could she be so heartless? Miriam tried to push his hands away, but he was stronger, much stronger. Years of working in the garage, years of physical labor had given him a strength she didn't have. Chase, please. Her face began to turn blue. Her eyes filled with tears. She no longer looked arrogant and self-assured. She looked like a frightened woman who realized she had gone too far. Tammy Wright, Chase said through clenched teeth. Her name was Tammy Wright, and she didn't deserve to die. Miriam tried to say something, but only a hoarse sound came out. You deserve it. At the last moment, as Miriam's consciousness began to fade, Chase saw something in her eyes that he hadn't seen during their entire encounter: remorse, fear, an understanding of what she had done. But it was too late. Miriam went limp in his arms. He let her go, and she fell to the kitchen floor amid the shards of the broken cup. Chase stood over her, breathing heavily. His hands were shaking. Blood was pounding in his ears. What had he done? He had killed her. He had killed the woman he had once loved. He had killed the only person who knew the whole truth about Tammy Wright. But as he looked down at Miriam's motionless body, Chase felt no remorse, only emptiness. She had been right about one thing. Miriam Russell had indeed died 3 years ago. What lay on the floor was Emily Harris, a woman built on lies and death. Now Emily was dead too. Chase crouched down next to the body. Miriam's face was calm, almost peaceful. Death had wiped away all the cruelty, all the arrogance. She looked like the woman he had married again. "I'm sorry," he whispered. He didn't know who he was asking for forgiveness, Miriam, Tammy, or himself. He took out his phone and dialed 911. 911, what emergency do you need? Police, I killed my wife. Sir, can you repeat that? My name is Chase Russell. I'm in apartment 15 at 1247 Oak Street. I killed my wife. Sir, stay on the line. We're sending a unit to your location. Chase put the phone on the table and sat down in a chair next to Miriam's body. He would wait for the police. He would tell them the whole truth about Tammy Wright, about the fake death, about 3 years of lies. Maybe then Tammy would finally get justice and a real grave with a real name. The sun was shining outside. Somewhere, Tom was waiting for a call from Emily Harris. Somewhere in Glendale, Caitlin was still keeping her dead friend's secret, and Chase Russell sat next to the body of the woman he loved and hated at the same time, waiting for them to come for him. The police arrived 12 minutes later. Detective Michael Reynolds, a man of about 45 with tired eyes, examined the crime scene and listened to Chase's confession. Mr. Russell, according to our records, your wife Miriam died 3 years ago in Glendale. It's a long story, Detective. Chase told him everything, from the accidental discovery of the photograph to the murder. Reynolds listened and took notes. These are serious charges, staging a death, possibly the murder of Tammy Wright. I'm prepared to confirm that under oath. Then you're under arrest on suspicion of murder. At the station, Chase was assigned a lawyer, Robert Keene, a short, balding man. This is an unusual case, Mr. Russell. We could try a defense based on emotional distress. I don't want to defend myself. I killed her. You were in shock. You found out your wife had faked her death. Any jury would understand. Fine. Do what you think is best. The Denver police contacted Glendale. Reynolds went to look for Caitlin Thomas. Caitlin worked at an elementary school. When she was shown a photo of Miriam alive, she broke down. I knew this would happen someday. She told them everything. How she had helped Miriam. How she had obtained fake documents through her ex-boyfriend. She said she had been in an accident, that someone had died, but she didn't say she could have saved that woman. Caitlin was arrested as an accomplice. In Glendale, the news exploded like a bomb. Bill Thompson came to visit Chase in jail. The whole town is in shock. We're raising money for a lawyer. No, Bill. You can't just give up. It won't change what I did. A month later, the trial began. The courtroom was packed with reporters and onlookers. Prosecutor Sarah Mitchell was relentless. This is murder. The circumstances do not give you the right to take the law into your own hands. Defense attorney Keene argued. 3 years of grief, then the shock of betrayal. Anyone could have lost control. The hardest moment was with Tammy Wright. The police identified her as Teresa Wright, 28, mother of a young son. Her mother, Dorothy Wright, flew in from Arizona. She was sick, drugs ruined her life, but she was my daughter. She deserved a dignified death. Chase asked to speak. Your Honor, I apologize to Mrs. Wright. Her daughter was the victim of someone else's selfishness. I will pay for her reburial under her real name. Dorothy cried, Thank you for remembering her. Verdict, guilty of manslaughter. Sentence, 12 years with the possibility of parole after 8. Caitlin received 3 years probation. The Colorado Correctional Facility was a harsh place. Chase didn't complain. He deserved it. He worked in the laundry, stayed out of trouble, and read in the library. Bill wrote regularly. The garage and house were sold, and the money went to court costs. 2 years later, a letter arrived from Dorothy Wright. I hold no grudge. Thanks to you, the truth has come out. Teresa now rests under her own name. My grandson knows where his mother's grave is. Chase read that letter many times. It contained gratitude for the truth, more than he deserved. The years passed slowly. Chase turned gray and gaunt, but he found a strange peace. He no longer tormented himself with what-if questions. He accepted responsibility and learned to live with it. In the library, he met a young prisoner named Marcus. "You accepted your guilt too easily. You could have fought." "What's the point? I killed a man." "But you were provoked." "Miriam made her choice. I made mine. We are both responsible." In the 7th year, Bill died of a heart attack. Chase was not allowed to attend the funeral. In the 8th year, he was offered parole. Chase refused. "Why?" asked his lawyer. "I'm not ready yet. I need time to understand who I've become." In the 10th year, a letter arrived from Tammy's son, Jamie Wright. "I'm 14. Teresa was my mother. Thank you for helping me find the truth. Now I know where she's buried." That letter became the most precious thing Chase ever owned. Tammy was no longer a nameless victim. In his 12th year, Chase was released from prison. 47 years old, gray hair, a face lined with wrinkles. No one was there to meet him. Bill was dead, and he had no other friends left. But in his pocket was the address of a center that helped families of missing persons. He wrote to them from prison, "I have experience finding people who don't want to be found." The bus took him to downtown Denver. Chase walked through the streets where he had killed his wife, feeling not guilt, but determination. At the center, he was met by coordinator Linda Garcia, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. "Mr. Russell, we received your letter. Your story is unusual. I know how lies destroy families, and how important the truth is, even when it hurts. We have several cases, people who have gone missing, families who are waiting for answers." Chase nodded. "Where can I start?" The first case was a 50-year-old woman looking for her son. The young man had disappeared 2 years ago after a fight with his family. The police considered him a runaway, but his mother believed something bad had happened. Chase studied the case, analyzed bank records and social media. A week later, he found the son in Portland. He was working in a cafe under a fake name, hiding from credit card debt. "He's alive," Chase told the mother. "He's afraid to come back because of his financial problems." The family was reunited. The mother paid off her son's debts, and he returned home. "How did you find him?" she asked. "I know how people disappear, and why." Months turned into years. Chase lived in a small apartment, worked as a volunteer, and helped families. Not all cases ended well. Sometimes the missing were dead, sometimes they didn't want to be found. But families got answers. He no longer thought about Miriam every day. The memories faded. Sometimes he remembered the good times, the wedding, their plans for the future. The pain went away, leaving only sadness for what might have been. Jamie Wright wrote to him every year on his mother's birthday. The boy grew up, went to college, and studied social work. "I want to help families like you," he wrote. On his 50th birthday, Chase received an unexpected visitor. Dorothy Wright had come to Denver. "I wanted to meet you in person," she said in a cafe near the center, "to thank you for what you're doing. I'm no hero, Mrs. Wright. I'm a murderer trying to atone for my sins. Maybe. But thanks to you, Teresa is at peace, and other families are finding their loved ones." She took out an old photograph of Tammy with her young son. "Keep it. Remember why you started." Chase took the photo. In it, Tammy was smiling, hugging the boy. She looked happy, healthy, before the drugs, before the streets, before that fateful night. "Thank you," he said. Dorothy left, and Chase sat in the cafe, staring at the photo. Tammy Wright was no longer just a victim in his story. She was a person with a family, dreams, and tragedy. In his pocket was a faded photo of Miriam, the only one he had kept. 2 women, 2 lives, intertwined with lies and death. Chase got up and walked back to the center. He had a job to do, to help people find the truth. No matter how painful it was, the truth was always better than the most beautiful lie. A new case was waiting on his desk, a teenage girl who had gone missing a month ago. Her parents were desperate. The police were at a dead end. Chase opened the folder and began to read. Somewhere there was a family waiting for answers, and he would find them. Justice had been served for Tammy Wright. Now he was helping others. One case at a time, one family at a time. This was his new life. Honest, difficult, but real.